Today we are talking about how to use personality profiles effectively in your business to help you grow, to help you get better results and more profits. We are here today. There's myself and Stephen. You might notice if you're a regular watcher that we're missing Jess. Jess, we miss you. But Jess is spending some time with her extended family. So we wish her all the best with that. But let's do some quick introductions, then we'll dive into today's topic. Stephen, tell people.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Una. My name is Stephen Lerman from Chameleon BDS. If you're looking to get in front of people to help grow your business, but don't want to, or don't have the resource to pick up the phone and make those phone calls, then please do feel to get in touch. We can have a chat and I can help you get in front of those people that you want to.
Fantastic. My name is Una Doyle. I'm a business strategist and coach, and I can help any established business to identify how to add a minimum of 50K. It's usually six figures in only 50 minutes or less. Let me know if you would like to do this at no charge to you. Okay, so today's topic, how to use personality profiles effectively. Now, the interesting thing is that I've come across so many people who, when I talk about personality profiling, they will say, oh yeah, I've done some profiles and it was interesting. I found out a bit more about myself, and we all like to find out more about ourselves, don't we? But they haven't actually done anything differently as a result. Stephen, what's been your experience?
With using personality profiles, so basically when I'm looking to hire people, originally I thought I want somebody that's just like me. You know, you want the outbound personality for helping you get in front of the right people and not being afraid to pick up the phone. So I've got that quite outgoing personality. I'm happy, chatty, go lucky. But then there are other things that I'm looking for as well behind the scenes. So it helps me to look at different personality profiles to see how they can assist me to help move the business forward. If everyone was the same as me, nothing would get done other than making the phone calls.
Absolutely. And I this is the key thing, is that we want to have a well-rounded team, not necessarily a well-rounded person. And so being able to focus on strengths is really, really important. Now, I think one of the things that's very critical in that is actually looking at, well, how can you utilize this in your business? Now, we talked a lot last week about how to hire and keep great staff, and we talked about flow and about the personality profiling tool that I use as that. And that's definitely one way that I use it, but I actually use it kind of throughout the whole business. So let me just quickly recap in case people are new. And by the way, do please pop it into the chat. Hashtag live if you're watching live, or hashtag replay if you are visiting us later. The thing is that, you know, first of all, we just need to understand what flow is. So it's flow is a state of being. So think about those times when you just felt totally on it, when you're engrossed in what you're doing, you lose all track of time, and there's no kind of nyet going on in your head. You're not worried or stressed about anything, which is really important. And this is one of the key reasons why I love to help my business owners, clients, and their teams to spend more time in flow, because that's literally instantly reducing the amount of stress and worry that they, and even anxiety that they might feel. So, but also you're being a lot more productive, you're adding value. And the reason is you're working in line with your natural strengths and personality. Now, I've done a multitude of personality profiles. Now, a lot of the time they were done as part of when I was being hired as an employee, and never once did anybody ever go through the profile and actually talk more about it, and talk about what it meant, and talk about, you know, well, how could I be successful in that role being the person that I was? And so I think sometimes people feel like, it's just, you know, it's a bit like doing a quiz on Facebook. It's a bit of fun, but it doesn't really mean anything. But actually it can be tremendously effective. So let me just quickly bring up the tool that I use, just so as I can be talking about that as we go through. Now, one of the things to be clear on is that different tools measure different things. So the Ignition profiling tool is all about measuring flow and identifying how can we have an individual, how can we have a team working together in flow. And this is really important because it's really about sorry, just want to put this down. When you have people in flow, then there's real productivity and profitability benefits. But let's look at it from a different angle. This is measuring flow. So we want to make sure that we're structuring the business so that the business owner, and then they can make sure that team members kind of match in with that they're in flow. So we need to look at the business model first. So what do I mean by the business model? Well, it's basically, what does your business do and how does it do it? Okay. So what are you selling? Who's buying it? How do you deliver it? How do you actually acquire those customers, those clients? So all of those kinds of things make up your business model. And if your business model is off in terms of what comes naturally to you, it's going to be a struggle. In fact, I was talking to somebody this week and they said it was like wading through a marshmallow, which really cracks me up. I sometimes use the phrase wading through treacle, but that one really tickled me. But if you imagine if that's what it's feeling like in your business, that it's hard for you to get traction or to scale up, then maybe it's because the business model isn't actually really working for you. So that's the first place that I look. Stephen, thoughts, questions?
It's a tough one because you want a collection of different personalities, don't you, when you in your business? I mean, you want people that will agree with you so you can start to move the business forward and get things done, but you want to be challenged. You want people that are going to complement your personality as well as bring their own personality to the business, so that you've got a fair mix. Otherwise, some things you'll focus more on, and then the other, what's important, might get left behind. So I think it's when you're talking about bringing people on board, or just when you're bringing people on board, you want a mix of the different personalities. Like I know I'm a captain, energetic and etc. But
Pilot.
pilot. Pilot. I need to be reined in. I need balance. So you want balance for different personality profiles to help you grow as a person and as a business.
Yeah, and I want to touch on something that you said there, and then I'm going to come back to the point about the different personalities and reining in. So when this isn't so much of a profile thing, but more of an attitudinal thing, and also how much clarity a company has got on, who they are, how they behave, what they're all about. And so when a company has got clarity on those kinds of things and has got plans, etc., it makes it a lot easier for them to hire the right people. But how they conduct themselves then it's about that whole thing of how healthy a team is it, how productive, how cohesive are they, and when people don't speak up, or there's one or two people on a team that are dominating the conversation and everyone else is just kind of sitting back and going, well, there's no point in me saying anything because either I'm not listened to, or I'm shouted down, or I know nothing will change, or when meetings are painful, that's a real indicator that there's issues in the team, that whether that's a team not at the kind of senior leadership level. If it's a lower down team, it means there's issues at the senior leadership level. Because whether you have real cohesiveness and clarity at that level, it filters through the rest of the organization. If you don't have those things, then that's when you find people won't speak up, they won't challenge ideas, because it's about the culture, but that culture is created from that leadership team. So that's kind of probably a whole other conversation, but I just wanted to kind of pinpoint that and say, yeah, let's talk about that another time. But in terms of, like a lot of the a lot of my clients, and I'll just bring this back up again, a lot of my clients are astronauts, pilots, and captains. Now, I do have other clients as well. So I'm currently working with an air traffic controller and a navigator, and I've got ambassadors next week. So I do have some other clients as well, but most of them tend to be in this top kind of northeast quadrant, the astronauts, pilots, and captains. And that's probably because I'm a pilot. And so I'm attracting clients who are similar to me and who have faced similar challenges. And my niche is in creative services and creative business owners, so that kind of makes sense, right? Now, what's interesting for a lot of these people in their business model is they're often doing too much. So what a big job is to actually prune. Let's just use gardening as a metaphor here. But if you imagine you've got kind of a tree, and then all around the tree are like lovely looking flowers, but actually in this case there might be weeds. Maybe all those lovely flowers or weeds are actually starving the tree of the nutrients that it really needs to grow. And so by weeding those things out, and then it means a space around that tree, and you can see that tree clearly. It creates focus. And so that's what I'm often doing with business owners, is helping them to kind of weed out and then prune the tree so that of their business model, so that they can be focused. Because a big challenge when people are trying to do too much is that they're spreading themselves too thin, and they end up never finishing anything. They spend too much time on too many projects. And when things aren't finished, they typically mean that you don't get paid. So, one crystal clear example of this was when I helped one of my clients. They came to me and they just wanted to do some business planning. So they weren't an ongoing client. There was someone I knew. I don't normally do this, right? Well, I kind of do it through VIP days now, but at the time, it was kind of a bit of a one-off. So help them with business planning, doing my 90-day planning process. And so as part of that, they had to make a decision between two projects. And one of those projects was going to net 50K in that quarter. The other one was only going to net 5K in that quarter. And so they chose to do the 50K one. And I said, look, do the other one, but you can, because it was something that mattered to them as well. I said, but do that in the following quarter. And then this other project is out of the way and bringing in money on an ongoing basis for you. So we did that. And they contacted me 5 months later and said, Una, can we do another planning thing? Okay, so we set it up and got on the call with them, and they started going, they're an astronaut, right? Top of the ignition compass, loads of ideas. And so they started going into, okay, so I've had this idea and this idea and this idea. I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. First thing we need to do is review your last plan. And the face was kind of like, uh-oh. So I was like, okay, what's that face about? And I said, well, actually, I haven't finished those projects. So we're kind of looking at, everything that they had on. I brought it up on the screen, and they hadn't finished anything. I said, well, what happened? And they said, well, do you remember we decided I wasn't going to do this other project? Well, I kind of decided that I would, and I've actually been working pretty much every weekend and almost every evening until kind of 10, 11 o'clock at night, working on these, but I'm actually not finished either of them yet. I was like, okay. Now, and so bear in mind, they were about to start embarking on new ideas, but they hadn't finished these other ones yet. So I was like, okay, so what's happened in terms of revenues? So have you been able to, get any revenue from either of these projects yet? No, because they're not finished. I was like, which I kind of knew would be the case. So I said, right. I said, so actually, you'd earmarked 50K that was going to come from this project, so you've not actually got that in yet. And their face was a picture, because they suddenly realized, oh my God, because I've gone and spread myself too thin, they basically lost 50K of income in that quarter, plus more, because actually it was 5 months later. So it was probably about 70, 80 grand that they had missed out on, because of not, we had pruned their business model and their plan, but then they'd ignored it. So now there was other reasons why that happened that were all kind of more mindset related in that. But I just thought it's interesting to just give a practical example of when people are spreading themselves too thin and they don't prune what they're doing and make sure that it works for them. That's the other thing, is making sure that the business model works for them. So for instance, I've sometimes had people where as part of their business model, I might be looking at their sales process and looking at what they're doing in that sales process. So maybe they have some free consults or some paid consults, or for service-based businesses, or they might have kind of an offer stack, that kind of graduates. People do this first, then they do that. It depends on the type of business and that. But we've got to look at, well, how are people delivering these things? How is that a good fit for their clients? And by the way, one of the best things I can do is help my clients to choose a profile that they have as their primary customer. Now, for a larger organization, obviously you will have multiple customer segments. That's fine, but I would suggest for each segment, pick a profile. Ideally, you would have it's very similar, because otherwise you've got very different marketing messages and ways, because people buy in different ways. So if you've got somebody who wants tons of proof, takes loads of time to make decisions, and has loads of questions and everything, that's a very different sales process and length of sales process than somebody who buys very intuitively and fast. And but what's going to appeal to that person is very different to what's going to appeal to the first person I mentioned. So we have to bring all those things into play. And then the next part of that is, well, how do you actually get in front of those people anyway? So you've got to look at the growth strategy. So we look at the business model, then we look at the growth strategy in terms of, okay, so how do you actually generate enough lead flow coming through, and making sure you're getting in front of the right and qualified prospects. So what may work for one person will be very different to another. So for instance, for me, as a pilot profile, I love to do what we're doing here today. Like, we're here, we're live, we never know what's going to happen. We did a little bit of a tech hiccup, which caused us to be a couple of minutes late. That happens, I don't mind those things. Like, that would have other people running for the hill. So, so I'm here as a pilot. I'm both, the Nova Fuel, very innovative, creative, and I'm also extroverted, this exuberant fuel. I'm all about people. So whereas somebody, say, got a navigator down here, so I've got a navigator client at the moment, and so one of my key recommendations for them to get new clients was to join BNI, because they're in an early stage business. So when they are more established, we probably will do more things like advertising and direct mail and things like that. But for now, this is a way that they can build relationships. They love those ongoing relationships with the sensational fuel down the bottom. But they're being able to network in a very structured environment where they can get to know a small group of people, and then those people refer the potential clients to them. So the thought for them of doing lives on a regular basis and things like that would just be like, oh, no, I don't want to be doing that. So we've got to pick the right strategies for who it is that's doing the lead generation. You're kind of working on the growth. So if that's not you as a business owner, who do you have on your team, and what's best for them? And this is why you can have people who've been really successful in one role in an organization, and then maybe they move to another organization, maybe they even get promoted or something, and they're not allowed to do what made them successful in the first place. So because they're doing it, they're being told to do it the way it worked for their manager. So their manager kind of moved up, and they want to do things a certain way, but it works differently for them. So we have to, kind of bear that in mind. So we talked about business model, we talked about growth strategies, and then the kind of third and also very important thing is then about, well, how do you actually structure your time and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis? And this is where, we, as business owners, we need to spend time in all four fuels. But the proportion of that is going to change depending on, one, which is our profile, and number two, what's in our plan. So how you spend your time ought to change every 90 days along with your plan. So one of the things I do is create a weekly flow framework. And so what that does is it allows us to look at, it's like time blocking, but it's kind of on steroids. So it's time blocking that allows you to be in flow. So let me talk here about a thing called context switching, which you may or may not have heard of. But if you think about when you're in flow, then, imagine that, like, people use the phrase steaming ahead, don't they? Like, when you're in flow, you're absolutely steaming ahead. So imagine that you're steaming ahead, but then, you decide to work on a different thing. Okay. And so what typically happens is you go from steaming ahead to being like water to ice, and then you have to go from the ice to water and to steam. And that typically, research has shown, can take 15 to 20 minutes. Now, obviously, this can happen when you're interrupted as well, but it happens when people change what they're doing. Now, if you're changing what you're doing from a very people exuberant focused task to then doing something that's wise fuel, where it's very analytical, and you're looking at data and, making decisions, getting insights from that, looking at compliance, those kinds of things. Like, those are two totally different ways of thinking. So the more that we can structure things to work for us, it's not necessarily about working on project A in one chunk of time and then you work on project B in another chunk of time. Actually, what are the kind of Nova type tasks that you would want to be working on around projects, A, B, and C, and do those at a similar time. And then there might be some sensational kind of more admin or customer service type things you want to be doing. And that could be, again, spread across different projects. So maybe it's probably more process driven when it's sensational fuel, tends to be those repetitive tasks. So we want to structure our time in a way that allows us to do that, basically. So yeah, Stephen, thoughts?
So, when you mentioned, I was about to mention the weekly flow framework, and you mentioned it. So, you introduced me to that tool, and I have to say, it's great because it allows me to focus, because I can sometimes be all over the place. I have so many ideas going on in my head about what I want to do, and I realize that if I don't have the structure, I'm going to get nothing done. But and like you said, it just it allows you to, if you want to steam ahead, for me. If I get sidetracked, and you say it takes about 20 minutes to get back on track, that several times a day, that's hours that have been lost. So with this for me, this weekly flow framework allows me to focus. It's great, and I know every day what I'm going to be doing and when I'm going to be doing it, and when I need to break, to recharge and step away, go take a quick walk or whatever. So now I'm so glad you introduced me to that. It took me a while to get used to it.
It does.
It doesn't happen overnight.
4 to 6 weeks, typically.
4 to 6 weeks, you say? Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I'm still working through, and I still have moments where I forget to use it. Excuse me. But one of the best things that you've ever introduced me to is that framework. I love it. It's great.
Fabulous. I was wondering why I'm not seeing any comments coming up. For some reason, they're not coming up in the live streaming tool that we're using, but I've just gone to LinkedIn and they are there. So Chris always said, wow, even if you branched into executive travel, I guess that's the ignition compass. He always brings a laugh to us. Okay, so Chris asked a question: how do you manage a lack of personality traits as a solopreneur, single team member? Right. I think what you mean there is like where there's a gap that, let me just bring the ignition thing. And I've just seen this great comment here as well by Kerry. I will come to that in a few moments as well. Let me just bring this back up. Okay, so say for instance, you're working in marketing, and let's say you're an astronaut, okay? And so very, very creative, loads of ideas, very visionary. Okay, so that's often the kind of person that you get working in marketing, great at creating content and things like that. But in terms of running a campaign, that's actually very sensational. So that's all about, and actually leading into kind of the wise fuel. So for instance, a navigator, they make the best project managers. But expedition leaders can be quite good at that as well. But navigators are brilliant at kind of bringing in the where and the when with the how and the measures and all of that kind of thing that you get with that wise fuel. So if you're missing that, then there's a few different ways you can do it. So one is you can hire freelancers to help you. Two is you can do things to kind of get into that energy, that way of thinking for a limited period of time. So, even as business owners, when we have teams, we still need to spend time in all four areas. But for instance, like, as a pilot, I do not enjoy doing kind of detailed, repetitive finance things. So I pay someone else to do my books. But I still have to look at my finances. Like that would be abdicating my responsibility if I didn't do it. Okay. So there are times we do need to do things that may not be 100% in flow for us. But the idea is to try and structure things so that you can limit them. So the way an astronaut might plan the way they do things would probably leave them a lot more freedom to do things more intuitively. But at least if they're doing that within a framework that has been predetermined and agreed, then that will allow them to be creative and to do things the way that works for them without being tied down to something that they might find really, really restrictive. But what they can do is they could maybe go to another team member in the business, or maybe hire somebody for an hour even, to say, can you please help me plan this? So, and that's something I'm often doing with my clients and it's interesting, even because as a pilot, I've had to learn how to do this, and I help my clients to do that. Now, it might be the opposite. So there might be an expedition leader or a navigator who needs to be doing marketing and is not great at coming up with ideas and content. So, I've got tools as part of my programs that will help them to know kind of what to do around that. But they may well want to hire someone to help them. Okay. So it may be a lack of skill. It may be a lack of time, So let me know if that's answered your question, Chris. Okay, and then Kerry is saying, I've been open and honest about my profile and when I'm in and out of flow. So she's a pilot, and being reined in consistently is tough, and I lose my sparkle. And when I lose my sparkle, I lose interest and look elsewhere. Yeah, absolutely. When recruiting, organizations should truly know what they will fully get from each profile and appreciate strengths and pitfalls. Absolutely, Kerry. It's really interesting because I think I remember working, I was doing some consultancy work with a local authority around kind of change management, employee engagement type stuff. And one of the people who was on my team, I kind of said, oh, how did you end up here? So they were working as a consultant as well. And they had a different kind of role. I think their role was around HR, if I remember correctly. And so they said, oh, well, I worked for this company for 15 years and I absolutely loved it. But then I got a new boss. And now I knew, because I'd been working with this person, I was pretty sure that they were exuberant fuel. So very extroverted, really people focused. And so they got a new boss who had a lot of wise fuel, and it was all about compliance measures and, what Kerry's just been talking about. And so basically he just lost all his sparkle, as Kerry said, in that role, and he ended up moving on. Now, if that boss had been aware of all of these, then that would have been a different story, wouldn't it? Because then they would have been able to appreciate what they did and maybe find ways of satisfying both people so that they got the information that they wanted, the data that they were very focused on, without it being like a straitjacket for the person. And I think that's really key, both in terms of how you manage people and how you work with people on your team, and in terms of the plans and weekly flow frameworks that you can set up, is that particularly for those of us who are more creative or who are more extroverted, we do not want to feel like we got a straitjacket on, because that immediately sends us going off on other tangents and in other directions. Yeah.
Can I just raise a point?
Sure.
The person that was it Carrie that taught
Kerry.
Carrie. So, and then the point that you raised about the boss that changed, surely they've missed a trick there, because when you're recruiting somebody, you want to nurture that talent, don't you? So, you look at specific personality traits and hope that you can help them grow. I mean, the idea is, because if they grow and they're happy, they stay happy, they want to work, they stay in the job long term. So when a new boss comes over that's got a different way of doing things, surely it would have been remiss of them not to sit down with the talent that they've got and say, listen, how have you done things? What have you done thus far with the old person that was your boss beforehand? This is how I do things. Do you see there's a way for us to move forward together? And then they could have actually worked together, rather than.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I worked in corporate and in those kinds of government type bodies, I found that I would start a lot of sentences with "but surely," and then I caught on and I realized that every time I was saying "but surely," something that was so obvious to me just wasn't obvious to other people, or there was just too much bureaucracy or any of those kinds of things going on. And so, yeah, it seems obvious to you, but you're a people person. You have that exuberant fuel. Imagine if you didn't have that and you're someone who's focused on the numbers, the data, you maybe not that into social niceties, it doesn't occur to you. Like, here's what it's like, okay? Have you ever been in a relationship where one person in the home notices every speck of dust and the other person doesn't?
Yeah.
Right? The person who doesn't, it's not that they don't care, they just don't see it. Whereas to the person who does see it, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you said you cleaned this and it's not clean. So
If you been speaking to my girlfriend.
so but it's exactly the same with people's personality. Like, what we see, what we consider to be important varies enormously. And so most people come from the perspective of, well, if you were more like me, we'd all be happier. Whereas when people understand about profiles, and particularly about flow, as I said, there's other brilliant profiling systems out there. They're just measuring different things, right? So so this one is all about the flow. And here's one of the things that's really important as well, is that when team members understand what has them be in flow and they realize they cannot get into flow on their own. And actually, Chris was saying, well, as a solopreneur or a single team member, well, you're helping your clients get in flow, or you're helping other teams in the organization get in flow by being in flow yourself. And so that's how you want to think about it. And it totally changes dynamics, because it actually makes how other people think and feel and operate way more important when people are, instead of where people are usually focused on themselves. So it puts the onus on other people and really kind of working together, which is important. So the chances are that manager just, it just didn't occur to them, because that's not how they operate. It's not how they think. Now, if you build this kind of thing into an organization, whether it's Ignition or some other profiling tool, then at least that will, that can become part of it. So, every time, when I'm working with new clients, one of the first things that we will do is I will, spend time going through their Ignition profile with them, because that's going to color everything that we do together. And in the same way, if you have a new team member, their profile is going to color everything that you do together. So,
I've got a question for you.
Yeah, how they're going to be successful. Beg your pardon?
So I've got another question for you.
Sure.
Do you, with regards to the flow and the Ignition Pro and the profiles, does it differ when you're working with larger organizations and smaller organizations? Do you find smaller organizations are much more receptive, or how do you impart your knowledge between the two types of organizations?
Well, I guess the difference really is about levels in teams. So when I'm working with a solopreneur or a micro business, I'm typically working with every person in the business.
Right. Okay.
So whereas in larger organizations, I might only be working with a leadership team initially, though quite often they will want to then have similar workshops in the other teams. Because they're kind of going, I think this person is this profile, but are they? And here's a classic thing: like if you're frustrated with a team member, or whether they're an employee or a subcontractor, or a freelancer, then the chances are they're out of flow. So, like one of the first questions you can ask is, how can I help this person get more in flow? Now, if you don't know what their profile is, it makes it a lot harder. And the interesting thing is, the more in flow somebody is, the easier it is to tell what profile they are. So when a manager says to me, or a business owner says to me, I have no idea what profile this person is, the chances are they're actually out of flow. So that's kind of something you want to address straight away. Yeah, I mean, in terms of employee engagement and retention, it's absolutely superb, as we talked about last week, because why would somebody leave when they get to be in flow in the role that they're in? But, it does raise questions about, okay, well, how do you keep this going in terms of having a career path that doesn't necessarily involve somebody having to do a role that is going to take them out of flow? You see this a lot. Like, so you were a salesperson. I guarantee you'll have seen this. When in a kind of mid to large size organization, a sales director is typically going to have actually a lot of wise fuel. They're much more focused on the analytics and the kind of planning and things like that.
Yep.
And if you take someone who's an exuberant salesperson and put them into that sales director role, quite often they then go out of flow. So businesses need to look at how do they kind of, first of all, they need to be looking at how they manage performance and actually monitor and review, well, how is this person, doing? How can we help them to be more successful? And you've also got to look at rewards, your kind of career paths, rewards and recognition systems as well. And just making sure that there's a way for people to grow, because quite often you'll end up eventually, even when somebody might be a great boss and they love what they're doing, there's a time when they may want to move on just because they want to earn more money. So if you can provide that path within an organization, it's a lot harder to do in a smaller organization than a bigger one. But, that's just kind of part of how that goes, really. So yeah, but I mean, if you've got the right things going on, then it should be easy to find the great next person.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I wanted to. It's funny how we keep coming back to team stuff, isn't it? I wanted to focus more on the how you can grow a business by using personality profiling. And so whatever your tool of choice is, have a think about the business model, the growth strategies, how you structure your time. It may or may not be the kind of tool that will work for that. If it's clear to you, oh yeah, great, then it will work for that. If it isn't, happy to talk to you about the ignition profiles for you, team members, etc. But I think even if you don't do any profiling, we often have a sense of what has us be in flow or out of flow just by understanding how we feel, because that's what it is. It's a feeling, it's a state of being. So you can think about those things and think about, is the way my business is structured currently working for me? And if the answer is no, like if you're not getting the results you want, it's not working for you. If you're making great progress, but you're not quite there yet, and it's just a matter of implementing stuff, great. But if you're not making the progress you want and you're not getting the results you want and you're not sure why, the chances are there's something amiss, something off in your business model, in the growth strategies that you're using, or how you're structuring time. Because you can have an amazing plan and an amazing business structure, But if your time isn't structured in a way that you actually get stuff done, then that's a problem. So great. All right. Well, look. Kerry's just saying, thank you, Una and Stephen. Understanding, knowledge, and acceptance of profiles and how they change during conflict is key. When you have a leader that gets it, it's magical. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and again, that's going kind of into the conflict thing is so important when it comes to teams, because you do want to have conflict. You want to have productive conflict. But yeah, we'll maybe, I think we do have a plan to talk about meetings and things like that. So we'll get into that into a further episode. Okay, well, I think that's everything for now. Yeah, just quickly, what's been the most standout thing for you, Stephen, today?
I think it's focusing on knowing the different profiles and how when you've got more than one profile for different team members, we can all work together to help the business move forward, rather than just if you're hiring or recruiting people the same type of profile as you, because you need that balance, and you want to balance is, but I think balance is tremendous.
Absolutely. Yes. And it is a real tendency for people to want to hire people just like them, because they feel, oh, great, I understand this person. We're going to get on all the rest of it. So it's, so yeah. And, there are times when you want to do that. So, like for you, hiring team members to do sales, you do want them to be like you.
Yeah.
But it's also about, well, yeah, but who else are you having on your team to help you do the other things? So, and I think quite often, particularly, for those solo business owners, they quite often go to that client delivery thing first. And sometimes that's the right thing to do, but not always. So, yeah. Anyway, look, if you want, hopefully you found what we talked about here today valuable. I think for me, just those nuances about kind of being reined in, that Kerry brought up, and just understanding, just really, I think what's important is just we have to, in working on our business, we've got to look at what is and isn't working. And if you're just kind of plowing through because you're so busy to kind of be able to lift your head above the parapet and actually look at what's going on in your business, that's the challenge. So hopefully we've given you some different parameters here that you can look at to assess what isn't working and to think about things a bit differently. So let us know what you think in the comments below, and we will be back same time next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.